Well, this is actually a subject that I get very excited about, and I'm happy to share a little bit of my thoughts and maybe a little bit of my experience. 1963, I was a babe in arms for most of the year. I turned 1 at the end of 1963. But I was raised in Atlanta, Georgia, in the midst of this movement, and my parents were very active in it. And so all kinds of people like this marvelous sister, Miss Rutha Harris, and other members of the organization that she sang with and helped to found, the SNCC Freedom Singers, were in and out of the house when I was a little girl. And so I feel like there was something of the energy and of the power of that movement and that music that literally was kind of coming up through the floorboards of the house as Bernice Johnson Reagan's group, the Harambe Singers, were performing on the first floor, and my family lived on the second floor. So I feel like this is part of my history, even though I was a little baby at the time. But I want to just say a few words briefly about some of the history of this powerful music. You heard Miss Rutha Harris's voice, and I know that many of you sitting in the audience, I see friends from the Spiritual Project and from other organizations in the city who know some things about this history. But for those of you who may not know as much, I just want to say something very briefly. This is a music of fighting, of struggling, of surviving that has come through hundreds of years of creation in this country. The songs that were sung in the freedom movement, by and large, were songs that were originally religious songs. They were songs that people of African descent, enslaved people of African descent, had created as a way to gird themselves and to connect themselves to the transformative power of music, of art, of life in the midst of very, very difficult life circumstances. And when it came time for the movement to gather up its strength and to send young people out into the streets and old people out into the streets and people into the jails, they used this music. They used spirituals, they used hymns, they used songs that became protest songs, sometimes simply by changing a few words. But the energy, the power of the music remained the same. These were songs that came up through not just people's experience in church, but they were songs that mothers and grandmothers and fathers would sing at home, that children heard in school, that they were just surrounded by this music. And I just want to give you one example. I'm sure Miss Rutha will give you many others of the kind of power that they represented. Ruby Sales, whom some of you may know or have heard of, was one of the SNCC workers, was a student at Tuskegee University in Alabama at the time that she joined the movement. And during her time in SNCC, she was almost killed. She narrowly missed a bullet that was meant for her, but that one of her co-workers, a white Episcopalian young seminarian, Jonathan Daniels, who happened to be working with SNCC at the time, actually pushed her aside and took the bullet and was killed. And in the midst of this experience, Ruby was under tremendous pressure not to testify. She and her family were threatened with death, and she said that at a certain point, and this is, you have to remember, she was a teenager at the time, she's in her late teens, and she said she went mute at a certain point because there was just so much going on, so much stress, so much pain that she couldn't even speak about the experience. But she said in the midst of that muteness, what she was able to do was sing. When she couldn't speak, she could sing. And the songs that she sang, she tells us, are the songs that she had heard first from her grandmother. Songs like the ones that we are hearing tonight that we heard in the video that Ms. Rutha is going to sing for us some more as we go a little further into the program. But she said that she could actually hear her great-grandmother's voice, the rumble of the ancestral voices in her own when she sang, and it was what gave her the strength to decide that she would indeed testify against the killers of the man who had joined them in the movement and who had essentially saved her life. That's just one of many, many stories of the power of this music. This is music that was used in jails when people who may not always agree on the strategies of a particular movement action, even if they didn't agree when they were talking, when they would start singing, there was an accord among the people who sat together. So you're going to hear tonight stories, you're going to hear songs, and hopefully you're going to hear voices of some wonderful younger people who are doing their own things with words and language and music, carrying on the tradition of vibration, sound as a resource for social justice activism. I'm very happy to have them, and I'm going to now just ask each of the people on the panel to briefly introduce yourself. We're going to have a session of a few questions that I'll put to you and ask you to speak specifically to a few things. But right now, if you would just maybe tell us who you are, where you're from, and what brings you here. What do you do that's related to art? Whether it's poetry, spoken word, hip hop, what is it that you do? And tell us a little bit about it.
My name is Jelon Martin. I come from Montbello High School, born and raised in Montbello. What I do is poetry. I transfer a lot of the things I see, the things I've been through, the things that I want to see in my community and in my country, and I transfer it into poetry. It's always been my let out, my emotional tie. Like always, every time I get struck with new ideas or an obstacle, I learn from it and I write through it. And my mom was a writer. My two other sisters are writers. And I can say I get a lot of what I say and the way I speak from my mother. And she kind of inspired me a lot because she wrote a lot. She showed me some of her work. And I started writing when I was probably in 7th grade. And then when I started learning new words and learning how to use them, I currently have this class at Montbello, this guy named Adam Bradley. He's a professor at CU. He taught a hip hop class, analyzing lyrics, like old school versus new school, and using how people told stories and why they use that lyric and why they use that rhyme to contradict what they say. And I learned a lot from it. And through that, I shared a lot of my work with him. And I was recently featured in the West Word. This reporter named Joe, he saw me and said I had a little talent, and inspired me and got me out here. I performed at the Crossroad Theater, it's not far from here, and kind of took a leap with mine. I currently playing, I'm a junior at Montbello. I plan to graduate from Montbello and go to CHU for comments and possibly, hopefully, get some of my publishers published. Thank you.